Good morning, everyone. We're continuing now with our chapter 17 in this biography of Paramahansa Yogananda by Swami Kriyananda, the salient characteristics of the Master. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow at thy feet. Bless us with your presence, which is always with us, so bless us with the awareness of your presence, that we may know at all times that we are loved and protected and guided. Help us to release all self-concern in the knowledge that we are children of a perfect mother, of a perfect father, who are always looking out for our well-being and taking us step by step to our eternal home in Thee. Om Peace. Amen. So, my friends, now we are up to quality number 28 out of 32. So, as always happens, if you don't quit, you make progress. So, we've made through it. His nature, Master's nature, was enthusiastic, but never bouncy. That's the word Swami actually uses, bouncy. So Master's nature was enthusiastic, but never bouncy. He never reacted emotionally to anything. His enthusiasm was always an expression of his bliss in God. You know, that he never reacted emotionally to anything. I'm going to start there, and then we'll go back to bouncy, because bouncy is also very interesting. A lot of times, well, many times when people read a statement like that, they translate it into something other than what it actually means. Part of the problem is the question of language, because in English, the word emotion means many different things. It's not an exact word in people's minds. They hear it in lots of different ways. When Swamiji is talking to us about the philosophical understanding that would make that a positive, not a negative statement, he makes a distinction between feeling and emotion. And it's partly arbitrary, but there's a logic to it. But many people think that if you don't have emotion, then you don't have deep feeling. And that is not at all true, because feeling is actually the fundamental nature of consciousness. Because the feeling of bliss is the definition of Satchidananda, the definition of God himself. Because without feeling rightly, you have a very dry and a very dull existence, and that which makes life worth living, you don't know where it's gone. It's very strange in our culture at this time. Um, I'm very much out of touch with modern culture and modern entertainment, so I'll speak from what has been true. You sort of, a lot of futuristic uh, programs, at least used to be, that the future hero was completely unemotional. But what that actually meant is that he was beyond feeling, life, death, and he would have sort of, as to move the plot along, he would have some animal passion for some other creature, but it would never be a deep, romantic, beautiful love affair. It would almost just be like a physical mating, and then we would go on from there, because the hero was always beyond all of those sorts of attitudes. It was a terrible universe that was being created. It was always made out of steel and glass and sharp edges, and just lots of things that do not really nurture the human heart, and instinctively we're repelled by such things. So when Swami says Master never acted from emotion, all of a sudden you think, well, this isn't the path for me, because I want to feel, I want to experience. So this is why the difference between feeling and emotion is the main point. Feeling, as I said, is the natural flow of the energy within us. And the primary fundamental feeling, that is the definition of consciousness itself, is bliss. And Swamiji describes love as bliss in action, which is just a wonderful way to say it. One feels bliss, and then from that joy comes this desire to share the joy. Swamiji has said it's the nature of joy to want to share itself. And to help us understand that, he uses the most concrete example that we all understand. You find a good restaurant, the first thing you do is you call your friends and tell them you found it. You go to a movie you really enjoy, you call your friends or text them or put it up on social media now, but you notify your friends that something has made you happy, and it makes you happier to want to share it with other people. There's been a couple of situations in my life where I was given private access to certain experiences that I knew everyone else would enjoy. And I remember particularly in one situation, the whole time I was there, my enjoyment of it was greatly diminished because of certain legal restrictions. I couldn't include everyone in it. So the amount of joy that I could have was much smaller because it's the nature of joy to want to share itself. So then Swami has that wonderful, interesting phrase, bliss in action is love. Because what does love look like? It's when we want to share, we want to help, we want to uplift, we want to make everybody else's life also beautiful. And that comes out of this feeling we have, this just rolling out of us feeling of joy that will get bigger if everybody else can be part of it. So feeling is that experience of life that emanates from within ourselves. Now what happens is we start with feeling, we start with love, we start with joy, but then that feeling becomes um, very particularized, which in and of itself is also the way we were made. People long to have a life partner. We long for close friends. We have children, and then those children become particularly precious to us. And all of this is still just the flow of feeling. But when that feeling is dependent on the response that we get, either from other people or from the universe around us. And then all of a sudden, that which is a free flowing, uplifted quality that comes from our connection with the divine. But now that free flowing, uplifted quality is conditioned by the response we get from outside ourselves. So I love you with my whole heart, but you don't love me. So now all of a sudden, instead of feeling uplifted by the love I feel, I'm crushed. Or I build a beautiful home and it's a wonderful creative artistic expression, and the California wildfire comes and takes it to the ground. So now the beautiful home that I love, it's been turned to ash. So now that free feeling of enjoyment of the beauty, I don't have it anymore because the house is gone. Now, most people in the world, when you say something like that, it's like, well, what are the alternatives? And that's why most people are not on the spiritual path, because the alternative to allowing feeling to become particularized emotion and then making us vulnerable to the inevitable ups and downs of this world. You see, this is what happens. The only certainty in life is change. And if we are going to be injured by change, then we are always vulnerable. And many people just shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's life. You just have to put up with it. But after a certain number of incarnations, and that number is in the millions, it begins to cross our mind that maybe something else is trying to happen here. And that's when you begin to ask deeper questions. about the nature of reality. And this is Sanatana Dharma. This is the teaching, the ancient teaching of India that talks about the definition of Sanatana Dharma. One definition is eternal religion, but the one I like more is that which is. Why would I have this inner freedom of complete bliss and perfect love only to have it disappointed again and again? Am I missing something here? And this is where, as Swami says in the Festival of Light, ever and again through your awakened sons, the answer comes. Meaning the avatars come and they say, much of what you understand is correct, but you're missing the point in certain critical ways. And that becomes the difference between feeling and emotion. Feeling is untouched by outer circumstances. Emotion is always dependent and therefore always insecure and a little bit afraid. So when Swami says that Master never responded emotionally, let's see exactly how he put it. Yes, he never reacted emotionally to anything. His enthusiasm was always an expression of his bliss in God. So if life brought to Master or to any of us, loving friends, beautiful children, an elegant or a home that pleases us, sufficient resources in order to live comfortably, children that we adore, all of these things. It's not unspiritual to give your heart completely. But we give our heart completely because it's a responsibility assigned to us by God. A gentleman in the Ananda community who's very much of a yogi, a deep and profound yogi. He's of my generation, my group, and his marriage now must be approaching 40 or 50 years anniversary. And famously, his wife said that after they got married, immediately after they got married, he said to her, "Now I want you to understand, I consider marriage just a job," he said. "No, I intend to do a very good job," he said, "but it's just a job." Now, she fortunately, because she loved him and was cut from the same cloth, thought that was delightful. And he's done a very good job. But what he's saying to her is that my feeling for you emanates from my love for God. And God has brought you to me as my wife, and therefore I will give myself wholeheartedly to the role of being your husband. But as a yogi, I will not react emotionally. What I express, my enthusiasm, since that's the word we're using, for the life we're going to have together, is because it emanates from inside of me. I'm not expecting it to emanate from you. And therefore, whatever your responses, your needs, your reality in this, I will act from my inner experience of the divine. And that's doing the same thing, but doing it very differently. So that's why Swami starts by saying, Master was very enthusiastic. Let's see what exactly the words were. He said, Master's nature was enthusiastic, but never bouncy. I just had to think about that word, bouncy. Just jumping up and down with excitement. Think of little children. Little children don't have any filters, and they don't have any sense of what. They don't have any sense of embarrassment. They just are what they are. And children demonstrate clearly the up and down flow of energy in the spine. Because when our feelings are positive and uplifted, energy flows upward in the spine. And when our feelings are depressed or discouraged or angry or jealous, all those things, energy flows down the spine. Now, that's an oversimplification because the energy is always moving up and down the spine. But when we behave to affirm our limitations, energy is pulled down. That's our vocabulary is. I feel uplifted. I feel downcast. I feel down in the dumps. I feel as high as the clouds. Just that's how we say it. And you watch children when they're excited and happy about something, they literally just jump. they jump up in the air because the energy is just moving them up in the air, and they just keep hopping because they're so excited. And then, of course, when things go wrong, they often throw themselves down on the ground, or refuse to get up. One day when I was out riding my bicycle, I saw several examples of small children exercising the only rebellion they have, mother or nanny or whoever it was holding them by the hand, trying to take them somewhere. These are children like about 3 years old, trying to take them somewhere, and the child just goes absolutely limp. I can remember doing that because you're too small. They can move you physically, but you can just refuse to cooperate. So you see these poor people trying to move this small child, and the child is just, gone like a rag doll, and you have to lift them higher off the ground, and their little bodies are like this. Just all the energy sinks. I'm not going to cooperate. So bouncy, but it's not limited just to children. We meet adults who express their enthusiasm by pumping the air with their fists, and nowadays people wiggle their behinds and shakes their hips, and it's just it's not very centered. Let's put it like that. It's not. It doesn't give you the impression that people are emanating from an inner reality. I know everybody is spiritually constituted exactly the same. Everybody has an inner self. Everybody has an inner spine, except perhaps this bank employee that I met once. And it became intriguing to just sort of imagine, is this person made like everybody else is made? Because absolutely everything about them, well, bouncy was exactly the word. Language, physical movements, just everything was, it just seemed to be imposed from somewhere outside, a constant, never ending, just like this, with no point of rest. So what you feel in these great spiritual beings is that they they participate. See, this is where you have to understand the example that's set. Because sometimes people will think, well, I'm not supposed to react emotionally. That means I have to have a very flat affect. I have to be completely uninterested in anything. I have to just sort of, nothing is of interest to me. I know I was traveling in another part of the world with a friend. And of course, the person I was traveling with, we had different temperaments, it's true. But um, we saw some things that were really quite phenomenal that you never see in this country, and I by nature am enthusiastic, and my travel companion by nature tries not to respond. Finally, I was sort of annoyed. I'm not annoyed, but encouraging. Show a little enthusiasm. Swamiji, until the end of his life, at the very end of his life, he became somewhat uninterested. He basically said, I've seen enough of this planet. I don't need to see any more. But Master was a very avid traveler. And, he took a trip up to Alaska. He would travel to Mexico. He even says himself, his enthusiasm for new places. As a boy, his father, he writes an autobiography, his father's position with the railway served him extremely well because his father would give him tickets to wherever he wanted to go. And he said, even as a grown man, his enthusiasm just it never waned. He always just loved to see new things and enjoy Master's creation, the Master, God's creation. And it's because he was always enthusiastic, but he didn't transfer that feeling of bliss inside of himself into any object. You see, that's when it becomes emotion. My happiness depends on my being able to see Niagara Falls and being able to go back to Niagara Falls. No, but when he was at Niagara Falls, he felt this tremendous feeling of enthusiasm and bliss. Isn't Divine Mother really remarkable? Master said also, it's very interestingly, he said, when I'm with my friends, I'm with them completely, but when they leave me, I never miss them. And at first you would think, well, that's kind of cold, isn't it? No, he loved them exactly the same, whether they were with him or not. He didn't love them less. He just didn't allow his own bliss to be conditioned by outer circumstances. Even though, I mean, when Gyanamata passed away, who was his most advanced woman disciple, he wept at her funeral. And the weeping of a master is very interesting, because something truly beautiful, which was Yogananda and sister, as he called her, he said, you know, it will never come again. This great and beautiful thing has passed. And the weeping wasn't so much, oh, poor me. You see, that's how we often weep when we have an emotion. What will I do? How will I feel? My life will never be the same. How could you leave me? But rather, it's weeping with the weeping is a further expression of that tender-hearted awareness of how just precious and beautiful things can be in this world. Haven't we all been moved to tears sometimes by just something that's just so precious and so beautiful? We just can hardly, it's not, they're tears of sorrow, but it's kind of a divine sorrow. It's the only way I could think to put it. That Master had this experience of perfect friendship with Sister as his disciple, as his friend. And now this whole drama that they had been assigned to carry out together. Swami wrote a song. He put a melody to a poem, I think by Robert Browning, if I have the name correct, but the poem is John Anderson. And it's a poem about um, a man and a woman who married at a young age, and now they were old. And they would totter down the hill for the last time and go to their final rest. It was just the end of their life. And it's a Scottish poem, and it's Robert Burns, that's, I think, correct. And the first verse is sung in the Scottish dialect slightly, and the second is repeated in English words. Swami didn't write the words. He just woke up, well, he was about to go to sleep after a long day of work, and the melody wouldn't leave him alone. He kept saying, I've had done enough. He said, he described it. I've done enough. He said, it's been a big day. I've done a lot of work. I'm not going to get up and write down this melody. But the melody insisted that he get up. There's another melody that had already been written to that poem. Swami didn't know that, he said. But that song, which is really about a man and a woman in their life together, what it really represents is the extraordinary experience of human life and human love and human friendship. That song, Swamiji couldn't sing that song. He couldn't get through that song because Swami wasn't married in that way, but he's had lifelong friends, and he has a guru, and we've all celebrated this long life together. And that song, for all of us, it would just, when he first was singing it, when we first were hearing it, I don't think any of us could get through it without weeping. But it wasn't the grief of loss. It was an overflow of abundance and an overflow of just how poignant and extraordinary the flow of love and friendship can be. You know, it would be rude not to be enthusiastic about that. That's sort of another way to think about it. For a while, Swami couldn't sing that song. He would just get halfway through, and then he would invite someone else up to sing it, because it was just too moving, the words and the melody of it. So deep, deep feeling is possible. In fact, deeper feeling is possible because it's not bound by the tiny elements of material existence, and it's not vulnerable. Everything in this world is so vulnerable. If your enthusiasm is for it as it manifests physically, then it can never be. It can never be infinite. But if, as Swami says, your enthusiasm always springs from your inner bliss, and we're just finding a way to see it expressed outwardly and appreciating it. You know, Master standing on the edge of Niagara Falls, taking his boat ride up to Alaska, going to the beautiful hanging garden, Milko, I think it's pronounced. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but the beautiful garden area on the lake, and Mexico, and in Kashmir, for that matter, Dal Lake in Kashmir. It's just, you see Divine Mother expressed so sweetly, and your heart just overflows with enthusiasm. And these are all gifts from the Creator. God gives us these friendships and these and children and partners and divine natural beauty and tiny animals and just beautiful flowers. I have a little apple tree outside, and for some reason the watering system wasn't working properly, and there's two small apple trees, and one of them was getting leaves and blossoms, and the other one was just absolutely a bare stick. And it turned out that when I finally consulted someone, when I saw what was happening, I started watering it, and almost as soon as I started watering it, it started budding. And yesterday I came back from wherever I had been, and I looked over, and it had blossoms. And I enjoyed my own response. I said to the tree, "Well done!" Just like, because it's a living thing, and it's responded, and somehow it managed to tell us how thirsty it was, and now it's covered with leaves, and now it's making blossoms, and soon we'll have a few apples from it. But it's just like the enthusiasm that coming from a deep inward appreciation of everything being an expression of the divine, that doesn't take us outward into restlessness, but actually takes us deeper and deeper into a sense of unity with all life. You see, that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for intensity based on limited particularization. What we're really trying to experience is the truth that we are a part of all that is. I mean, that's really something remarkable to consider. And we should have a lot of enthusiasm for being part of all that is, because that is breaking down the egoic conditions that keep us so vulnerable. This is what makes us unhappy, whether we actually can identify it or not, is that intuitively we know that death is coming, that I've been someone else before now and I'll be someone else again in my outward form, but that which is truly me is always here. What is reality? For what end were we made? This is again from the Festival of Light. Everything that we thought was light was but darkness. Who are we in reality? And what is the purpose of life? And this is where the festival says, ever and again, through your awakened sons, the answer comes. And so this is when we talk about the salient characteristics of Master. What does it mean to live a human life? And Swami says Master was very enthusiastic, but his enthusiasm was never bouncy. His enthusiasm never caused him to lose connection with the power of who he was. And the enthusiasm he expressed was always a further expression of a constant inner experience. He didn't need to be at Niagara Falls to be able to appreciate the glory of God. He didn't need to be with his friends in order to experience the great love he felt for them. His enthusiasm was always an expression of his inner bliss. Cultivate that inner bliss, and everything else will naturally follow. God bless you.